Jake Morrison sat in the pilot seat of his cargo ship, the Lucky Break, watching the distress signal blink on his screen. 3 days. The colony ship Horizon had been calling for help for 3 whole days. Nobody had answered. Nobody except Jake. He was not supposed to be here. Freelance salvage operators like him were not supposed to answer military frequencies. But Jake needed the money. A derelict colony ship meant salvage rights. Salvage rights meant millions of credits. So he came. What he found was not a derelict ship. It was a massacre. The Horizon drifted in space, its hull torn open in dozens of places. Dead bodies floated in the void around it. But the damage was not from any accident. These were weapon marks, clean cuts that sliced through metal like paper. 3 strange ships circled the dying Horizon like sharks. Jake had never seen ships like these. They were sleek and angular, covered in dark armor that seemed to drink in the light. Not human ships. Not even close. Jake watched through his scope as an escape pod launched from the Horizon. A bright flash came from one of the alien ships. The escape pod exploded. Then another pod launched. Another flash. Another explosion. They were killing survivors, hunting them down one by one. Jake felt something cold settle in his chest. He had served 6 years in the Colonial Marines before going independent. He had seen pirates. He had seen raiders. But this was different. This was murder. Pure and simple. He killed his running lights and drifted closer, hiding in the debris field. Through his scope, he could see figures moving on the alien ships. They were not human. They moved like insects, quick and precise. One escape pod made it past the initial attacks. It tumbled toward a nearby asteroid. 2 of the alien ships broke away to chase it. The 3rd ship stayed behind, firing into what was left of the Horizon. Jake made his decision. He fired up his engines and pushed the throttle hard. The Lucky Break screamed toward the lone alien ship. It was suicide, he knew it. But he could not just watch them murder people. The alien ship saw him coming. Its weapons turned toward him, glowing with deadly energy. Jake did not try to dodge. He aimed straight for the ship's side and hit his emergency thrusters at full power. The impact nearly killed him. His ship's reinforced front, built for pushing asteroids, slammed into the alien vessel. Metal screamed and tore. Jake's safety harness crushed his ribs as the force hit him. But his ship kept going, crumpling the alien ship's hull like paper. Both ships spun out of control. Jake fought with his controls, trying to stabilize, but his systems were dead. Through the chaos, he saw something terrifying. A docking tube extended from the dying alien ship, reaching for his hull with magnetic clamps. They were boarding him. Jake unbuckled and ran to his weapon locker. He grabbed his old service rifle, a Martian arms model he had kept from his military days. He loaded a fresh magazine. His hands shook, but his grip stayed firm. The airlock shuddered as the alien tube made contact. Jake took position behind a cargo container, rifle aimed at the inner door. His heart pounded, but his aim stayed steady. The airlock cycled. The inner door began to open. Jake had read about first contact scenarios back in training. They talked about diplomacy and peaceful gestures. None of that mattered now as 3 armored figures stepped through his airlock with weapons raised. They were tall, nearly 7 feet. They had 4 arms and legs that bent backwards like a bird. Their armor looked alive somehow, seamless and organic. Their helmets had multiple glowing sensors that swept the cargo bay. They moved like soldiers. Trained soldiers. Jake opened fire. The rifle roared in the small space. The first alien staggered as bullets hit its chest armor. The armor held for a few shots. Jake kept firing, walking his aim up into the creature's helmet. On the 5th round, something cracked. Purple blood sprayed across the deck. The other 2 fired back instantly. Energy bolts screamed past Jake's head, melting the metal behind him. He rolled right and came up behind different cover. He fired again, but these aliens were tough. His bullets barely slowed them down. One alien rushed him with impossible speed. Jake swung his rifle like a club, catching it across the helmet. The alien stumbled. Jake kicked its knee joint hard. Something cracked. The alien went down, making clicking sounds. The second alien had a clear shot at Jake. He saw death coming, saw the weapon charging. Then the alien's chest exploded outward. Jake blinked in confusion. He saw another figure standing in his airlock. Another alien, but smaller. This one wore no armor, just a torn environmental suit. In its 3-fingered hands was a crude metal spike, dripping with purple blood. The alien Jake had knocked down tried to get up. The newcomer moved fast and drove the spike down into the fallen warrior's helmet. More purple blood sprayed everywhere. For a long moment, Jake and the unarmored alien stared at each other across the cargo bay. Both were breathing hard. Both were covered in purple blood. The alien's suit was torn in places. Through the holes, Jake could see smooth blue scales. But it was the alien's face that caught his attention. Large eyes that showed something Jake recognized instantly. Terror. Pure terror. The alien made a sound between a whistle and a hiss. Then it collapsed against the airlock frame, clutching a wound in its side that Jake had not noticed before. Jake lowered his rifle slightly. Every instinct screamed that this could be a trick. But his gut said otherwise. This alien had saved his life. It had killed its own kind to do it. He took a step forward with his hands raised in what he hoped meant peace. The alien flinched but did not run. Up close, Jake could see it was female. At least what passed for female in her species. Her eyes tracked his every move. She seemed too hurt to flee. Jake pulled a medical kit from the wall and approached slowly. The alien's breathing was fast and shallow. Purple blood pooled beneath her. Whatever had hurt her, it was bad. He opened the kit and pulled out seal patches. They were meant for hull breaches, but could work on wounds. The alien watched him with those huge, terrified eyes as he moved toward her wound. Easy, Jake said softly, knowing she could not understand but hoping his tone would help. I am trying to help. The alien trembled as he pressed the seal patch against her wound. She made a high-pitched sound but did not pull away. The patch stuck to her skin and the bleeding slowed. Behind them, alarms began to blare. Jake's ship was dying. From the sound of it, they had maybe 10 minutes before life support failed. He looked at the alien woman, at the bodies of her people on his deck, at the destruction visible through his cracked viewport. Nothing made sense. But he knew one thing for certain. They needed to get off this ship, together. Jake offered his hand to the alien. She stared at it for a long moment. Then she reached out with one of her 3-fingered hands and gripped it. The lucky break shuddered. Another system failed somewhere. They ran toward the emergency shuttle, the alien woman leaning on Jake for support. Every few meters, the ship groaned like a dying animal. The alien was surprisingly light despite her height. She kept making soft clicking sounds. Jake could not tell if it was pain or an attempt to talk. Probably both. Almost there, he said more to himself than her. Just a little further. They rounded a corner and Jake froze. Through the viewport ahead, he saw one of the alien warships coming closer. Its weapons glowed bright. It was not trying to dock. It was going to fire. They were going to destroy everything. Jake broke into a run, practically carrying the alien now. She wheezed but did not protest. The shuttle bay doors were sealed. Jake had to manually crank them open, his muscles burning. The alien tried to help with her free hand. Her strength surprised him despite her injury. The doors opened just as the first energy blast hit the lucky break's back end. The entire ship lurched sideways. Jake and the alien tumbled through the opening, hitting the floor hard. Emergency lights flickered red overhead. Jake's shuttle was small, barely more than an engine with a cockpit. He had bought it cheap 3 years ago and never upgraded it. Now he was glad. Less to break. He shoved the alien into the passenger seat and threw himself into the pilot chair. His hands flew over the controls, running through a launch sequence that normally took 5 minutes. He did it in 30 seconds. The alien watched him with those huge eyes, her head tilted like a bird studying something it did not understand. Another impact rocked the lucky break. This one was bigger. Jake heard the sound of a hull breach somewhere behind them. They had seconds. He hit the launch release. The shuttle's clamps let go. The bay doors were stuck half open from the damage. Jake did not wait. He fired the thrusters at full power and aimed for the gap. The shuttle scraped through with inches to spare, leaving paint and probably important parts behind. But they were out, tumbling into open space as the lucky break took another direct hit and began to break apart. Jake fought for control, firing thrusters to stop their spin. When he finally got them steady, he could see the full disaster. The horizon was gone, just scattered debris. His ship was breaking into pieces, and the 3 alien warships were turning toward him. "Come on," Jake whispered, pushing every bit of speed from the weak shuttle. They needed cover fast. The asteroid field was their only chance. The alien woman suddenly grabbed his arm. Her grip was strong. She pointed at the tactical display with another hand. Jake followed her gesture and felt his stomach drop. The escape pod. It was still out there, drifting near a large asteroid. The shuttle's alarm screamed as Jake pushed the engine beyond its limits. The alien warships were almost in range of the escape pod. Jake could see their weapons charging for the kill shot. He checked his weapons. 2 mining charges meant for breaking small asteroids. Not much, but better than nothing. He armed both charges and locked onto the nearest warship's engine. The targeting computer said they were out of range. Jake fired anyway. The charges streaked across the void, tiny points of light against darkness. The first charge missed. The second hit the warship's back shields and exploded. It was not enough to do real damage, but it got their attention. Both warships stopped chasing the pod and turned toward Jake's shuttle. "Yeah, that is right," Jake said. "Come get me." He spun the shuttle and dove into the asteroid field. The 2 warships followed. Energy bolts flashed past his cockpit, heating the space where he had been moments before. Jake threw the shuttle into rolls and turns, using every rock as cover. The alien woman clutched her restraints, breathing fast. But she was not looking scared anymore. She was watching the tactical display with intense focus. After a moment, she reached over and tapped something on his navigation console. Jake glanced at what she entered and raised his eyebrows. It was a flight path through the asteroids. It looked crazy at first, but then he saw the pattern. The route would keep them hidden behind the larger rocks while giving them a clear run to the outer system. "You are a pilot," he said. Surprised, she looked at him and made a series of clicks that might have been yes. Then she pointed urgently at the path she plotted. Jake did not hesitate. He followed her route, trusting her knowledge. The warships had to break formation to follow. Jake heard one of them scrape against a rock, its shields flaring bright. They burst out of the dense part of the field. Jake saw what the alien had been guiding them toward. A narrow canyon between 2 massive asteroids, barely wide enough for the shuttle. The warships would have to slow down or go around. Jake took the canyon at full speed, his hands steady despite the walls on either side being so close. Behind them, the warships split up. One tried to follow. The other went around to cut them off. The alien tapped the console again, pointing to a fork in the canyon ahead. Jake took the left branch and suddenly understood her plan. This route was too tight for the warship following them. He heard metal scraping on stone. His sensors showed the warship's shields failing as it ground against the canyon walls. They shot out of the canyon and came face to face with the second warship, exactly as it arrived to cut them off. But Jake was ready. He killed his forward thrust and fired his side jets downward, dropping below the warship's firing arc. The warship's blast passed overhead. Jake pushed forward again, racing under the enemy's belly. For a second, he and the alien pilot were close enough to see into the warship's cockpit. Jake caught a glimpse of the armored warriors inside, their weapons tracking his shuttle. Then they were past, accelerating away. The alien woman let out a sound that Jake could only call a laugh, high-pitched and musical. Despite everything, he found himself grinning, but they were not safe yet. Jake checked his fuel and winced. All that fast flying had burned through most of their reserves. They had maybe an hour of thrust left. The alien woman seemed to sense his worry. She studied the navigation display for a long moment, then pointed to a small mark on the star chart. A derelict station, old human construction abandoned for decades. It was 3 hours away at current speed. Jake did the math. With careful power management, they might make it. Might. He set the course and throttled back to minimum thrust. The warships were still following, but they had bought some distance. It would have to be enough. As the rush faded, Jake became aware of the alien woman studying him. Those large eyes moved over his face, his hands, his uniform. It should have been weird, but instead Jake found it oddly comforting. She was trying to understand him, just as he was trying to understand her. "I am Jake," he said, pointing to himself. "Jake Morrison." The alien tilted her head, then made a sound. A complex series of clicks and whistles that Jake had no hope of copying. She seemed to realize this, paused, then tried again with something simpler. "Cree, Cree," Jake repeated, probably saying it wrong. "Okay. Nice to meet you, Cree. Sorry about the mess." Cree made a sound that might have been agreement, then winced and clutched her injured side. The seal patch was holding, but Jake could see purple fluid seeping around the edges. She needed real medical help soon. He pulled out his emergency kit and offered it to her. Cree looked through the contents with clear interest, picking up items and studying them before carefully putting them back. When she found the pain medicine, she looked at Jake with a question in her eyes. He mimed an injection and nodded. Cree studied the injector for a moment, then pressed it against her neck. The medicine hissed into her system. After a few seconds, her breathing eased. "We are going to make it," Jake said, though he was not sure if he was trying to convince her or himself. That station might have supplies, medical equipment, maybe even a way to call for help. Creed looked at him steadily. Jake had the odd feeling she understood more than he realized. She pointed at the tactical display, where the warships were still visible as small dots on the edge of sensor range. Then she pointed at herself, at the bodies they had left behind on the lucky break, at the destroyed horizon visible in the rear cameras. She made a series of sounds, complex and emotional, that Jake could not translate. But he understood the meaning. This was not over. Not by a long shot. Jake nodded slowly. "Yeah, I know. But first we survive the next few hours. Then we figure out what comes next." Cree seemed to accept this. She settled back in her seat, her eyes drifting closed. The pain medicine was making her drowsy. Jake let her rest. She had earned it. He turned back to the controls, watching their fuel and keeping one eye on the warships. The derelict station grew slowly larger on his screens, a dark shape against the stars. As he flew, Jake's mind raced. The attack on the horizon had not been random. Those warships had been hunting humans, destroying escape pods to make sure no one survived. That kind of organized killing meant one thing. This was planned. This was war, and Cree had turned against her own kind to help him. Why? What had made her kill her fellow warriors and run with him? Jake glanced at the sleeping alien. Her scaled features looked peaceful now. In the low light of the cockpit, he could see faint glowing patterns on her skin, pulsing slowly with each breath. Whatever her reasons, they were in this together now. Partners by necessity, if not by choice. The station loomed larger ahead. Jake began his approach, praying the old structure still had air and power. They would need both to survive. Behind them, the warships kept coming, patient and relentless. The station hung in space like a corpse, its solar panels long dead and its hull marked with tiny impact craters. Jake recognized the design. A Frontier Industries way station, one of hundreds built during the expansion years and left behind when faster ships made refueling stops unnecessary. He brought the shuttle in carefully, searching for a docking port that still worked. Most of the outer ring was breached, but the central hub looked intact. Jake lined up with an old cargo airlock and engaged the docking clamps. The clamps held. Small miracle. Cree stirred as the shuttle stopped moving. Her eyes opened slowly, still clouded with medicine. But she sat up when she saw the station through the viewport. "We need to move fast," Jake said, checking his scanner. "Those warships are still coming. Maybe 40 minutes behind us." Cree nodded and unbuckled. She moved stiffly, favoring her injured side. But she grabbed a tool from the shuttle's locker, a breaching tool that could also be a weapon. Smart. Jake cycled the airlock, expecting it to fail. Instead, old machines wheezed to life and the outer door opened. The station's systems were running on emergency power, barely working but operational. They stepped into darkness. Jake turned on his helmet light and the beam cut through decades of dust. The station had been left in a hurry. Equipment lay scattered on the deck. A drink container floated past, its contents long since frozen and gone. Cree moved to a wall panel and looked at it closely. She traced the human letters with one finger, her head tilted. Then she did something that shocked Jake. She pulled a small device from her suit and held it up to the panel. The device glowed softly. Suddenly the panel lit up, showing a station map. "You have human tech," Jake said, surprised. Cree looked at him and made clicks. She pointed to herself, then to the map, then made a gesture Jake thought meant, "I study this." A scientist? A spy? Jake was not sure, but it was clear Cree had been studying humans for a while. That raised questions about how long her people had been watching humanity before they attacked. Cree traced a route on the map, pointing to a section marked Medical Bay. Jake nodded. They needed supplies, and Cree needed better treatment than his patches could give. They moved through the station's halls, their footsteps echoing. Emergency lights turned on as they passed, triggered by motion sensors. The station's computer was still barely active, keeping basic functions running. The medical bay was in better shape than Jake hoped. The equipment was old but sealed in containers that protected them from decay. Jake found a scanner and powered it. Behind them, Jake heard the sound of the main airlock opening. The boarders were inside. The maintenance tunnels were cramped and dark, forcing them to crawl in places. Jake's light showed old machinery covered in dust. dead power lines, and the occasional robot that had stopped working decades ago and never moved again. Halfway through, Cree suddenly stopped and held up a hand for silence. Jake froze. From somewhere ahead, he heard sounds, clicking, like the alien language but different, mechanical. Cree moved forward carefully and Jake followed. They came into a larger chamber, some kind of storage area. Jake's light swept across something that made his blood run cold. War machines, dozens of them standing silent in rows. They were shaped like humans but 12 feet tall with heavy armor and weapons built into their arms. Old frontier defense models, built during the colonial wars but never used. And in the center of the chamber, 3 of the machines were active. Their optical sensors glowed red as they turned toward the intruders. "Run!" Jake shouted, but Cree was already moving. The war machines raised their weapons, old but still deadly, and opened fire. Energy bolts tore through the air where Jake had been standing a second before. They dove behind a cargo container as the machines came forward, their footsteps shaking the deck. Jake looked at Cree. "Please tell me you have a plan." Cree studied the approaching machines, her eyes calculating. Then she looked at Jake and made a gesture he did not understand at first. She pointed to the machines, then to herself, then made a downward motion with her hand. Wait. She wanted him to wait. Before Jake could stop her, Cree stepped out from cover, directly into the path of the war machines. They immediately targeted her, weapons charging. Jake's heart jumped, but Cree moved with impossible speed. She ran forward, not away, closing the distance to the nearest machine in a blur. The machine tried to track her, but she was too fast. She jumped, using one of the containers as a springboard, and landed on the machine's shoulder. The machine thrashed, trying to shake her off, but Cree was already working. Her hands moved over the machine's neck joint. Jake saw her pull something from her suit. A thin cable with metal ends. She jammed one end into a port on the machine. The machine froze, its weapons powered down. Its optical sensors changed from red to blue. Cree made a happy sound and looked at Jake. She held up the cable's other end, which Jake now saw was connected to her device. She had hacked it. Somehow she had taken control of the war machine. The other 2 machines were adapting, changing their targets. They ignored Cree and focused on Jake. He grabbed his plasma cutter and ran, weaving between containers as energy bolts chewed up the deck behind him. Then Cree's captured machine stepped into the line of fire. It was bigger than the others, probably a command unit, and its armor held against the attacks. It fired back, and Jake watched in amazement as it took apart one of the attacking machines with precise shots to its joints and power core. The 3rd machine tried to retreat, but Cree's machine was faster. It closed the distance and literally tore the other machine's arm off, then drove it through the opponent's chest. Sparks flew and the machine collapsed. Silence fell over the chamber. Cree's controlled machine stood among the wreckage. Cree herself was still on its shoulder, looking pleased with herself. Jake walked over slowly, staring up at her. "That was either the bravest or the craziest thing I've ever seen." Cree made a sound that might have been a laugh. She patted the war machine's head almost like it was a pet, then looked at Jake with an expression he was learning to read. Pride mixed with determination. She had just shown him something important. She was not helpless. Despite her injury, despite being cut off from her people, she was a warrior and a technician. She could fight, and more importantly, she could think. A sound echoed through the tunnels. Footsteps, many of them. The boarders were getting close. Cree's expression changed to something more serious. She made clicks and pointed to the cargo bay exit ahead. But then she looked at her war machine and back at Jake. Jake understood. "You want to take it with us?" Cree nodded hard. She climbed down from the machine and did something with her device. The machine's systems cycled down and it collapsed into a smaller shape, folding its limbs against its body. Still huge, but maybe manageable. From the tunnels, Jake heard voices now. The clicking, whistling language of Cree's people. They were close, maybe minutes away. "All right," Jake said. "But we need to hurry. And you're going to have to explain to me later how you just hacked a 50-year-old war machine with alien technology." Cree made a sound that was definitely a laugh. She turned the war machine back on and it rose to full height. Under her control, it moved to the cargo bay doors and began forcing them open, its strength making quick work of the old locks. Beyond the doors, Jake could see the station's cargo bays and through the windows open space. There were shuttles here, old cargo ships left behind when the station was abandoned. Jake ran to the nearest one and checked its status. Dead, completely drained. Same with the second, but the third showed minimal power. Enough for life support and maybe a short flight. This one, he called to Cree. She directed her war machine to the shuttle, and Jake watched in amazement as it folded itself even smaller and squeezed through the cargo door. Whatever Cree had done to its programming, the machine was now completely under her control. Jake fired up the shuttle systems as Cree climbed into the second seat. The engines coughed to life, running on fuel that had been sitting still for decades, but they ran. The cargo bay doors were closed, but Jake did not have time for the proper launch. He aimed the shuttle at the doors and fired his plasma cutter at the control panel. The doors blew outward and Jake hit the throttle. They shot out of the station just as armored figures appeared in the cargo bay behind them. Energy bolts followed them into space, but Jake was already weaving, using every bit of skill he had. The two warships were waiting, their weapons tracking the shuttle. But Jake had one advantage they had not counted on. He was desperate, and desperate pilots did crazy things. He flew directly at the nearest warship, so close that its automated defenses hesitated, unable to fire without risking damage to their own ship. Then he dove under its belly and used its bulk as a shield against the second warship. Cree was working hard at her console. Jake saw her taking power from every system they did not need and putting it into the engines. The shuttle accelerated, pushing past its safety limits, racing away from the station and the warships. Behind them, the warships broke formation to follow, but they had lost precious seconds. Jake aimed for the densest part of a nearby nebula, a cloud of dust and gas that would mess with sensors. They plunged into the murk and visibility dropped to nothing. Jake flew by instruments alone, trusting his instincts and Cree's navigation help. Behind them, the warship's targeting sensors were scattering, unable to get a lock. After 10 minutes of blind flying, Jake eased back on the throttle and let the shuttle drift. He killed all systems they did not need, reducing their energy signal to almost nothing. On the sensors, he watched the warships sweep past their position, unable to find them in the nebula's interference. The enemy ship circled for a while, searching, but eventually gave up and left. Jake let out a breath he had not known he was holding. "We made it, again." Cree slumped in her seat, exhausted. But when she looked at Jake, her eyes were bright. She made a soft sound, then reached over and touched his arm gently. Jake understood. They had survived together, fought together, saved each other's lives again and again. Whatever else happened, whatever this war meant, they were a team now. In the cargo hold, the war machine sat silent, a 12-foot reminder that they were not helpless anymore. If Cree could hack one machine, maybe she could hack others. Maybe they had a chance after all. "We need to find help," Jake said. "There is a military post 3 days from here. If we can reach it—" Cree interrupted with a sharp sound. She pointed at her device where she had pulled up a star chart. She marked several points, all of them military bases or major colonies. Then she drew her finger across each one in a slashing motion. Jake felt cold. "They are all gone? All of them?" Cree's expression was grim. She nodded slowly. The war was not just starting. It had already begun, and humanity was losing badly. Jake stared at the star chart until the symbols blurred. 3 days drifting in the nebula had given him too much time to think, and none of his thoughts were good. Every human base Cree had marked was gone, destroyed in coordinated strikes that showed planning and preparation. Humanity was under attack, and from what Jake could tell, no one was fighting back well. Cree had spent most of the 3 days working on her captured war machine, connecting it with systems she had built from the shuttle's spare parts. The machine now stood in the cargo hold, its systems humming with power she had somehow pulled from the dying shuttle. On the morning of the 4th day, Cree made an excited sound and called Jake over. She had connected her device to the shuttle's communications, and now she pulled up something on the main screen. A data packet heavily encrypted. Jake watched as Cree's device worked through the encryption, layer after layer falling away. What came out was a series of coordinates and what looked like building plans. "What is this?" Jake asked. Cree pointed to the coordinates. Jake sat down heavily. Everything he had assumed about Cree was wrong. She was not just a random deserter. She was a rebel, someone who had given up everything to do what she thought was right. "That facility," Jake said, pointing to the coordinates. "You want to free the prisoners." Cree nodded firmly. But she pulled up more data. Defense systems, guard schedules, patrol patterns. The facility was heavily defended. designed to stop attacks from human military forces. It is a suicide mission, Jake said. Even with your war machine, we are 2 people against an entire base. Cree looked at him steadily. She pulled up the prisoner lists, thousands of names scrolling past. Then she pulled up one name in particular, making it bigger on the screen. Lieutenant Commander Kate Morrison. Colonial Marines captured 4 months ago during the defense of Proxima Station. Jake's sister. He stared at the name, his mind spinning. Kate had been listed as missing after Proxima Station went dark. He had assumed she was dead, had been trying not to think about it for months. How did you know? He whispered. Cree pointed to her device, then to Jake's old military card that he kept in his pocket. She had scanned it days ago, run the name, and found the connection. She had known from the beginning that Jake had a personal reason to fight in this war, and she had kept this information, waiting for the right moment to show him, making sure he understood what they were fighting for. Jake looked at the facility plans again. It was suicide, he was right about that. But Kate was alive. His sister was alive, and she was being held in that place, being studied like a lab animal. He could not leave her there. Okay, Jake said, but we do this smart. We need more than one war machine and a dying shuttle. Cree made a sound of agreement. She pulled up another set of coordinates. A human military depot, one that had not been marked as destroyed on her charts. It was deep in the asteroid belt, hidden among the rocks, meant as a backup position. You think there are still people there? Jake asked. Cree shrugged, but she pointed to the facility's last recorded transmission date. It had gone dark 2 weeks ago, which might mean it had been destroyed, or it might mean they were keeping radio silence. Only one way to find out. Jake plotted a course to the depot, carefully moving through the nebula to avoid being seen. The shuttle's fuel was almost gone, running on fumes and hope. They would have one shot at this. If the depot was destroyed or empty, they would be stuck. The journey took 6 hours. Jake spent most of it checking and rechecking their approach path. Cree worked on her war machine, making final adjustments. She had managed to connect it with weapons from the station, giving it better firepower. When they finally cleared the nebula, the asteroid field stretched before them like a frozen ocean. Jake's sensors could barely pick out the depot among all the rocks. It was well hidden, he would give the military that. As they got closer, Jake's communication board lit up. Someone was calling them, demanding identification codes. Jake hesitated. His codes were years out of date, from when he had left the service. But he sent them anyway, along with a simple message. This is Jake Morrison, former Colonial Marines. I have intelligence about enemy operations and human prisoners. Permission to dock. For a long moment there was silence. Then a voice came through. Morrison? Jake Morrison. This is Command Sergeant Harris. We thought you went freelance. I did. But things have changed. Another pause. You are aware there is a war on? Yeah, I noticed. And you have enemy contact following you? Jake checked his sensors. They were clean. Negative. We are alone. We. Who is with you? Jake looked at Cree. This was the moment of truth. That is complicated. I need to dock and explain in person. Stand by. Jake waited, watching the depot's defensive weapons track his shuttle. One wrong move and they would be destroyed. Cree sat perfectly still, understanding that their lives hung in the balance. Finally, the voice returned. You are cleared for Bay 3. But Morrison, if this is a trick, you will not make it 10 feet inside. Understood. Jake brought the shuttle in slowly, following the guide lights. The depot was bigger than he had expected, carved deep into a massive asteroid. The bay doors were hidden so well he almost missed them. They sealed behind the shuttle, and Jake heard atmosphere flooding the bay. Through the window, he saw a dozen soldiers taking positions around them. Weapons aimed at the shuttle. This is going to be interesting, Jake muttered. Cree checked her weapon, then looked at Jake with a question in her eyes. Leave it, Jake said. We are not here to fight. We are here to save people. Cree seemed to understand. She left her weapon on the seat but brought her device. The war machine powered down in the cargo hold. Jake opened the shuttle's door and stepped out, hands visible. The soldiers immediately focused on him. Jake saw their expressions change from suspicion to shock as Cree came out behind him. Stand down, someone shouted, and weapons shifted to target Cree. Wait! Jake stepped between Cree and the guns. She is with me. She is a defector. She saved my life. You brought an enemy combatant to a classified military base. The speaker was a tall woman with command markings. Commander Sarah Blake, according to her name tag. She looked angry. She has intelligence, Jake said quickly. About prisoner facilities. About human captives, including my sister Kate Morrison. She is alive, Commander. Kate is alive and this defector can help us get her back. Blake's expression shifted slightly. Lieutenant Commander Morrison is alive? Yes, along with thousands of other prisoners. Blake studied Cree, who stood calmly despite having a dozen weapons pointed at her. Why would you help us? Cree could not answer with words, but she held up her device and pulled up the footage she had shown Jake. The humans being rounded up, the recognition of fear in their faces. Blake watched the footage in silence. When it ended, she looked at Cree with new understanding. You saw we were not monsters. Cree nodded. Blake lowered her weapon. Stand down. If Morrison trusts her, that is good enough for now. But she stays under guard until we check her intelligence. She turned to Jake. My office, both of you. We have a lot to discuss. As they walked through the depot, Jake saw the scope of humanity's last stand. There were maybe 300 people here, military and civilian mixed, living in tight quarters. They had managed to rig together a working command center, but their resources were clearly limited. Blake's office was a converted storage room with a desk and a tactical display. She pulled up what intelligence they had, and Jake felt his heart sink. The situation was worse than he had thought. We have lost 70% of our outer colonies, Blake said. The inner system is under constant attack. We are losing ground every day, and we have no idea how to fight back well. Their technology is better. Their numbers overwhelming. What about the military? The fleet? Scattered. The first strikes took out our major bases and communication centers. We are operating blind, unable to coordinate. Every base is on its own. Jake looked at Cree, then back at Blake. What if we could change that? What if we could get inside one of their facilities? Access their systems? Blake's eyes narrowed. You are talking about the prisoner facility. It is more than that. According to Cree's intelligence, it is also a research center. They are studying us there, learning how we work. But that means they have detailed files on human military capabilities, our technology, our tactics. If we could access that data, we would know what they know. We could adapt, find weaknesses in their strategies. Exactly. Blake studied the facility plans Cree pulled up. This is insane. We do not have the forces for an assault. We do not need an assault, Jake said. We need infiltration. A small team, using one of their own war machines as a cover. Get in, free the prisoners, steal the data, get out. Using a captured war machine? Blake looked at Cree. She can control their technology? Cree nodded and pulled up her modifications to the war machine. Blake's tactical officer, a young lieutenant named Alex Hunt, whistled low. That is impressive work, Alex said. With a few more machines, we could do real damage. The facility has dozens of war machines, Jake said, all connected to a network. If Cree can access that network from inside, she could turn their own defenses against them, Blake finished. She sat back thinking, it is still a long shot. Even if we pull this off, we would be alerting them to our capabilities. They would adapt. They are going to adapt anyway, Jake argued. Right now they think they have all the advantages. Let us show them they are wrong. Blake was quiet for a long moment. Then she turned to Cree. Can you do what he says? Can you hack their network? Cree met her gaze steadily and nodded. And you are willing to turn against your entire species for this? Cree did not hesitate. She pulled up the image of her dead relative, then images of the human prisoners. She made her choice clear. She had chosen the side that did not torture and experiment on thinking beings. Blake nodded slowly. All right, we will do it. But I am coming with you. If Morrison is in that facility, I am bringing her home myself. The planning took 3 days. Blake put together a team of 12. Herself, Jake, Cree, 6 combat specialists, 2 engineers, and a medic. They would use Jake's captured war machine as their main infiltration tool, with Cree piloting it remotely while hiding inside. The depot's engineers worked around the clock, modifying the war machine to make it look less obviously hacked. Transport Delta 7 to facility control, Blake said, her voice changed to match enemy communications. Requesting emergency repair bay access. War machine critical failure. There was a pause, then a response in the clicking alien language. Cree tensed, listening, then gave a thumbs up. They had bought it. The facility's bay doors opened and they glided inside. Jake could see other transports coming and going, war machines standing guard at key positions. The facility was massive, easily able to hold thousands of prisoners. They sat down in a repair bay as directed. Through the window, Jake saw alien technicians approaching, ready to examine the damaged war machine. "Now," Blake whispered. Kree turned on the war machine. It came to life inside the transport, and before the technicians could react, it burst through the cargo doors. Kree controlled it with smooth precision, using its massive arms to grab the nearest technicians and throw them against the walls. The team poured out behind it, weapons ready. Jake's rifle barked, dropping 2 guards before they could sound an alarm. The other team members spread out, securing the bay with brutal speed. "Phase 1 complete," Blake said. "Kree, you are up." Kree had already moved to a terminal, her device connecting with the facility's systems. Her fingers flew over alien controls. Jake watched as security feeds appeared on nearby screens. She was inside their network. "Find the prisoners," Jake said urgently. Kree pulled up a map highlighting a section 3 levels down. The holding cells. Jake saw life signs, hundreds of them. His heart raced. Kate was somewhere in there. But Kree's expression changed to alarm. She pulled up another feed. A massive hangar bay filled with war machines, at least 50 of them all powered up and ready to go. "They are mobilizing," Blake said grimly. "They know we are here. How long until they reach us?" Jake asked. Kree typed. 4 minutes. "We need to split up," Blake decided. "Kree, can you control more than one war machine?" Kree nodded and pointed to a nearby machine in the repair bay. She had already hacked it. "Take 2 engineers and hold this position. Keep hacking their systems. Turn their defenses against them. The rest of us will go for the prisoners." "I can get more machines," Kree typed. "Access main hangar." Blake considered, then nodded. "Do it, give them hell." They split up. Jake's group, Blake, 4 combat specialists, and the medic, raced toward the detention level. Behind them, they heard the thunder of war machine footsteps as Kree sent her growing army to stop the enemy forces. The corridors were a maze, but Jake followed the maps Kree had downloaded to his datapad. They met guards twice. Each time the team's training won out. These aliens were soldiers, but they were used to fighting helpless prisoners, not trained Marines. The detention level doors were sealed, needing a scan from an alien hand. Jake was about to blast them open when one of the combat specialists, Corporal Danny Price, dragged forward one of the unconscious guards and pressed its hand to the scanner. The doors opened. Inside was hell. Hundreds of cells stretched in all directions, each containing human prisoners in various states of health. Some looked relatively okay. Others bore the marks of experiments. Surgical scars, attached devices, missing limbs. "Split up," Blake ordered. "Find Morrison and start releasing prisoners. Arm anyone who can fight." Jake ran down the corridors, checking faces. Most prisoners were too shocked to react, staring at him with hollow eyes. He opened cells as he went, shouting for them to follow him. Then he heard it. "Jake, Jake!" He turned and saw her. Kate looked thin, with a nasty scar across her shoulder, but she was alive and on her feet. "Kate!" Jake rushed to her cell and blasted the lock. She stumbled out and threw her arms around him. "How did you?" "I thought I would die here," she choked out. "Not a chance. Come on, we need to move." Kate grabbed a weapon from a dead guard and fell in beside him. "How many people did you bring?" 12. 12. "Jake, this facility has hundreds of guards." "Yeah, but we have a secret weapon. Come on." They met up with Blake's group, which had freed nearly 100 prisoners, but alarms were blaring now. Jake could hear combat echoing from upper levels. Kree's war machines were engaged. Blake pulled up a tactical display. "Kree is holding them, but she is outnumbered. We need to get these people out now." "There is a shuttle bay on level 2, Kate said. "If we can reach it." An explosion rocked the facility. On Jake's datapad, he saw a video feed from Kree's position. She was controlling 6 war machines now, but the enemy had brought up heavy weapons. Her makeshift army was taking losses. "We are not leaving her," Jake said firmly. Blake nodded. "Get the prisoners to the shuttle bay. Morrison, you are in command of the evacuation. Jake, you are with me. We are going to help our friend." Jake and Blake fought their way back toward the repair bay, picking up stragglers as they went. The facility was in chaos, with prisoners breaking out everywhere and war machines fighting through corridors. When they reached Kree's position, Jake's heart sank. 3 of her war machines were down and the remaining 3 were heavily damaged. Kree herself was still at the terminal, but enemy forces were closing in from 3 directions. "Kree," Jake shouted. "We need to go." Cree looked up. Jake saw something fierce in her eyes. She typed rapidly. "Not yet. One more thing." On the screens, Jake saw her accessing the facility's core systems. She pulled up files, massive data dumps of everything the aliens had learned about humanity. Military deployments, technology analyses, biological studies, strategic assessments. She was copying it all. "They are breaching the bay doors," Blake warned, firing at advancing troops. Cree's fingers flew. The download bar crept upward. 60%, 70%, 80%. An energy bolt hit the terminal and sparks flew. Cree kept working, ignoring the danger. "Cree, we are out of time." Jake grabbed her arm. 90%, 95%, 100%. Cree pulled her device free and nodded. But as they turned to run, a section of wall exploded inward. A massive war machine stepped through, bigger than anything Jake had seen, with weapons that made the others look like toys. A command unit. It raised its weapons, targeting Cree. Jake threw himself forward, pushing her aside as energy bolts tore through the space where she had been standing. Blake returned fire, but her rifle barely scratched the command unit's armor. It swatted her aside like an insect, and she hit the wall hard. The command unit advanced on Jake and Cree. One of Cree's damaged war machines tried to stop it, but the command unit tore it apart with brutal power. So Jake and Cree backed up against the terminal. This was it. They were out of options. Then Jake heard a sound. The thunder of footsteps, dozens of them. Through the breached wall, war machines poured in. 20, 30, 40 of them. Cree had accessed the main hangar. She had taken control of every war machine in the facility. The command unit turned to face this new threat, but it was overwhelmed. Cree's army swarmed over it, tearing into its armor with coordinated precision. The command unit fought back, destroying several machines, but numbers won out. It collapsed under the assault, its core ruptured. Cree slumped against Jake, exhausted. Blake pulled herself up, bleeding from a head wound but alive. "Remind me to never make you angry," Blake said to Cree. They ran for the shuttle bay, Cree's war machine army forming a protective corridor around them. The facility was tearing itself apart, secondary explosions rippling through key systems as Cree's hacking broke down critical systems. The shuttle bay was chaos. Kate had managed to load most of the prisoners onto transport ships, but there were not enough vessels for everyone. Jake saw at least 50 people still waiting. "Take my transport," Blake ordered. "Load them up. We will find another way out." "Commander, that is an order, Morrison." Jake helped load the remaining prisoners, counting heads. They were going to make it. Against impossible odds, they were actually going to make it. Then he realized Cree was not with them. He turned and saw her at a terminal, still working. "Cree, come on!" She looked up and shook her head. She typed, "Must destroy facility. Cannot let them keep research. Need to stay, make sure complete destruction." "No," Jake said flatly. "I am not leaving you. Must data too important. Must return to your people. Then we will destroy it together and leave together." Cree's eyes showed emotion Jake had rarely seen in her. Fear. Not for herself, but for him. She typed, "Facility will explode. 30 seconds after I trigger. Not enough time for both of us." Jake felt his throat tighten. "Cree." She put her hand on his chest over his heart. Then she pointed to herself. To him, to the data device she had used to copy all the facility's information. She made him understand. Her life or the data. One or the other. Not both. "There has to be another way," Jake said desperately. Blake appeared behind him. "Morrison, we need to go. Now." Cree pushed Jake toward Blake. She turned back to the terminal, her fingers moving over the controls. "No." Jake struggled against Blake's grip. "Cree, do not do this." Cree looked back at him one last time. Her expression was peaceful. She had made her choice. She had saved thousands of lives today. Human lives, and she had given humanity the intelligence they needed to fight back. It was enough. She activated the self-destruct sequence. "Move." Blake dragged Jake toward the transport. He fought her, reaching back toward Cree, but more hands grabbed him, pulling him onto the ship. Through the window, Jake saw Cree standing at the terminal, surrounded by her war machine army.